Well, welcome to the Energizing America podcast, where we talk all things energy while leading in our business, community, and life. I'm excited to sit down today with Ryan Swor. Is that how we say it?
You got it, yeah.
But yeah, with LSC Engineering out of Duluth, Minnesota here, we've been able to partner together on a couple projects, which has been exciting. But Ryan, let's hear a little bit about you. What's your education? What's your background? And what's your mojo in life? You're obviously an engineer or a business guy of some sort, so fill us in.
Yeah, so I started in the business in 2006 in this industry with Lake Superior Consulting. I started as a technician in our corrosion control team, doing a lot of coding, like industrial coding, application inspection. So making sure that contractors are following manufacturer specifications and owner-operator specifications. Worked in a number of different industries: power, marine, mining, oil and gas, doing that type of work. But then also something called cathodic protection, which a good way to think about that is when you have steel installed in the environment, whether above ground or buried, it's prone to the effects of corrosion. And so, of course, for some of these for this infrastructure, we want to make sure that doesn't happen. So cathodic protection is really a means to supplement coating failure when protective coatings aren't working perfectly. This science helps protect it from corroding and keep the asset intact. So a lot of testing and things that go along with that, design, installation work. And so through my early career, I was doing a lot of work around North America, really around the United States, traveled all over the place, and was really trying to build a team. Our founder had some customer relationships around this type of infrastructure and these assets, and introduced me to those individuals, sent me to get a lot of technical training. When I started in the business, I was getting my degree from University of Minnesota Duluth in organizational management. So you were right, business major. Graduated, with that degree, and then started really a technical track of learning through industry certifications. If you were to draw a parallel, it's sort of like an electrician, but we work on the DC side instead of the AC side.
Right.
And not really much residential application, mostly in industrial.
So you got your start in what year? 2006?
2006, that's right.
And as you were doing this, you went to college? Is that what I'm hearing?
In the early days, yeah. And
Okay.
so that was one of the things that attracted me to this was the owner had said, hey, I was working at a steel plant, late night shifts, overnight, going to school during the day. And he said, I'll let you work around your school schedule. And I had about a year and a half left when I started. And so I would go to school, then I would go to the office, and I would go back to a class, and I'd go to the office, and then sometimes work weekends. And a lot of times I would travel. I would try and prep in advance with my professors. And, hey, I've got a job that requires me to travel. I'm going to be gone the next 2 weeks. Can I pre-plan any homework we have or tests I need to take, things like that? And almost all of them, not all, but almost all were really accommodating to that and recognized, I think, as I gave the description of what I was doing and how committed I was to it, that, hey, this is somebody that's trying to build a career while they're attending school. And they were really flexible with me. And, of course, at this time, there was no online opportunities and you couldn't do anything remotely.
Right.
And then when I graduated, I was almost working full-time hours anyway on average, but went to a full-time sort of schedule with the business, trying to grow it. And basically it was, hey, there's this piece of my business, the owner, that I see as an opportunity that I want somebody that I trust to run and grow. And so started, gaining customers, gaining skills, and executing projects for these customers. And as we got more reputation, more knowledge, we hired more people and started to build our business in this scope. Now, we also do engineering, design, and a lot of other scopes as a business today.
Sure.
But that's where I got my start.
So are you saying you were with LSC way back in 2006?
That's correct, yeah, and I've been there since.
Wow. So tell me, I want to know more about LSC and that history there, because there's a couple of things on my mind. One is how many people are actually working when they go to college, and how many people are lucky enough to start a project or working with somebody that they trust and believe in, and they have a product there or a service that they're into and can just fly right into life. And by the way, grow a business with it. That's a really incredible story in of itself. And it's not just chance. On the Energizing America podcast, we talk a lot about this, that it requires a certain amount of energy and effort. And when you put that in, you get some results. There's certainly chance and the right people in the right spots, and all of those things come into play. But I want to hear a little bit more about your traveling. You got done with school. You really hit the road then?
Yeah, I was gone a lot.
And what were some of the places you were at?
All over the country. I mean, predominantly Midwest, Gulf South, northeast, southeast.
Okay.
Not a lot on the West Coast.
And when I went on your website, you guys are like on four-wheelers, you're out in the brush.
Oh yeah, we're out in the field. It was probably my favorite part about the work is it was a to me it felt like a good balance of what you might traditionally call blue collar and white collar work. So, we were kind of the nerds of the construction industry is what it felt like. You have to have a lot of tools, technology, equipment, computers. And so what we'll do is we'll go into the field, we get dirty, you're working long hours for weeks at a time. Like you said, in the brush, going through wading rivers, scaling mountains, climbing fences is kind of the job. But while you're doing those things, you have to really use your brain. You have to pay attention because the information we collect and the assessments we're doing have real implications on the safety of the infrastructure we're assessing. And so that type of work is predominantly like things like pipelines. That's probably some of the pictures you saw and what you're referring to. And that was a lot of what I transitioned into doing, the majority of the time. And so we're making sure that the things that are protecting these assets are working correctly. And if perhaps they're not up to what the customer standards might be or what the Code of Federal Regulations or the federal government says is required, we're making engineering recommendations or engineering-based recommendations on what types of things can be done to remediate or mitigate those issues. And then oftentimes seeing that through implementation.
So you and hotel rooms got along?
No, I don't care if I never stayed in one again, but no, these days a lot of people are doing the Airbnb sort of verbo things and sort of staying together and getting that pricing power. But I was in a lot of hotel rooms. I've stayed in all of them. It got to the point where it's like probably two things that come to mind. One is, I see, you can put me in a hotel room, I open my eyes and I know what I'm in. This must be a Days Inn, or this is a Holiday Inn Express. They all have their same sort of similar themes. The other thing too is when you're mobilizing to a project, it's like I'll drive 1,300 miles to get there. And I know where I'm going. I've got it, mapped out. And thankfully now we have phones that allow, or computers on our vehicles that allow us to do that. But, I had those atlases that you buy at gas stations, the red ones in the back of my truck behind the passenger seat. And, I'd kind of map out my route and, what freeways are you taking? How are you getting there? And it's like I'd pull into the city. I'd called ahead, booked my hotel, and I pull in and I get in the parking lot. It's like, I've stayed at this hotel before. I've been to this city. I didn't even know that. I forgot that I've been here. So, I probably worked in like 30 different states, I would say, over the years.
Yeah, that traveling gig is just interesting because it moves almost. One thing I've experienced too is I'll go to great lengths to avoid a motel room. Like normally if you're traveling like, 8 hours, 10 hours, time for a hotel, like, no, like 16 hours, I'm like pushing the boundaries as to what's safe, and I shouldn't, but I find myself pushing that boundary just to like avoid another night at a hotel. No, I'm just going to push myself to get home because the last thing I want is a Holiday Inn. Nothing against Holiday Inn, but you're just tired of the hotel scene. Whereas when you first start traveling, there's a little bit of fondness with it, like a somewhat coolness of it or excitement, I guess, maybe seeing the different areas. And I just made the comment last week to our team that, man, I got to find the joy in traveling again. Like, look for the exciting pieces of when you're traveling, because when you're so focused on work, it's almost like you forget to look around you. We were at a project in the, absolute middle of nowhere in Texas earlier this week, and talk about just beautiful. Mm-hmm. But if you're not watching, you're not going to see it. And that happens to me. I get so focused on my work that I forget, hey, pull your head up, look around you. This is some beautiful country that we get to explore.
You and I are very similar in that regard. I was working on a project last year, and we were working in the Smoky Mountains, and we got to the top of this mountain, get to the top of it, and it's hot out, sweating the whole crew. And I'm like, all right, everybody stop. And they kind of looked at me. I'm like, no, just take a minute and look around. Took a lot of pictures together of us smiling, and it's like, this is beautiful. We're getting paid to do this. This is amazing. For me, it really sort of shrank the United States. All the travel we've done, and we're driving, 90% of the time because we have to have a truck full of equipment to do our jobs. It doesn't really work to ship this stuff and rent vehicles. And you really start to gain appreciation for, one, how easy it is to really get from Minnesota to Texas or Florida, and then two, just the changing terrain and landscape along the way. And
not
then
to
thinking
mention-
about how business sort of follows that as well in a lot of cases.
Yeah, exactly. And not to mention the culture in each one of those areas. You know, we have an office in New Mexico, for example, that's significantly different than our office in North Dakota. And when I'm in New Mexico, I try to act like they do in New Mexico. Like the things that are important to them are a lot different than the things that are important to the folks in North Dakota. And it doesn't mean one is better than another. It just, you get to experience that in a real way when you're in a city for an extended period of time.
I agree.
Or in a different area. So let's talk a little bit about Lake Superior Consulting. Was that the business name when you joined them in 2006?
Yes, it was.
And how big was the company?
I get asked this question. I don't know. I don't have the
Okay.
records, but it felt like about 15 employees, maybe 20 employees.
Because you were just along for the ride. It wasn't in your vision that you were going to be running this company someday.
Oh, absolutely not. Yeah, no. To me, the thing that really attracted me to it, I knew the founder quite well. He was a family friend for many years beforehand. And you mentioned a term earlier, trust. And I think he always deployed trust is given, not earned. So you have trust. And so it wasn't that, I earned the trust to go develop a business. I was given it. And I think it had a lot to do with our relationship. But, to me, success looks like trusting people and then giving them the opportunity to thrive and supporting them along the way. That builds a really healthy culture. He said something to me when we were sort of negotiating, and not on pay or anything like that. He was trying to get me to come to the business, saying, he said there was a piece of my business that nobody's doing anything with, huge opportunity. I'd like you to come run it. And coincidentally, I heard that, and I don't know that I had an appreciation for it at the time, but I was in an entrepreneurship class at UMD at the time, and I started learning about how commonly or how frequent small businesses fail. And, the first 5 years failure rate's pretty daunting to somebody that's looking to be an entrepreneur. And it's like, people don't usually get success until several iterations. And so when he said, I'm looking for somebody to come take a piece of my business and run it like it's their own, I knew that I wanted to be in an entrepreneurial setting. I knew I wanted to be either a leader in business or run a business. I thought that for many years. And this felt like a good way to get your toe, dip your toe in the water in that. And it's like, well, I don't know if this is going to work out. I don't know anything about what it is that I'm going to be doing. And his response to that was, well, we'll teach you the technical stuff. I just need somebody who's got ambition and a willingness to learn. And I thought, well, heck, I'm going to get a lot of learning from this. I'll be able to step in and learn about, if we fail, I'll learn a lot from that. So when I go up in my own business, I might have a better chance at success. And so that's kind of how I looked at it in the early days. And then what I found out is I became addicted to it. And that addiction it's still prevalent for me, but it's just shifted in terms of what I'm focused on. So early days, there was an addiction to gaining skills, gaining reputation, making a name for ourselves and getting customers. And then that sort of transitioned into a job well done. Nothing feels as good as when you work really hard for somebody and then they demonstrate appreciation, whether it's a phone call or an email or in the form of more work. It felt really good. That's motivating. And then it transitioned into hiring people and watching people grow and gain careers. I always tell this story about how I think of somebody in my mind. I kind of hold this story about they started as an intern going to school, as a summer intern. And then while they were still going to school, getting a 2-year associate's degree, they had a year left. So they worked in the summer and then they stayed on part-time while going to school the next year, ultimately starting full-time. And since then, I've watched this person, this is probably 13, 14 years ago, build a career and a reputation, support our business in so many phenomenal ways. And, this individual now has a family, has bought property, has built a home, has wealth and significant value that they're contributing for our customers, I think, to the community. And there's just so much pride for me that comes from that, to know that perhaps I had somewhat of a hand or helping hand in that individual being able to do that. I can't think of a better way to positively affect community and people than to support them in that sort of way. So that became really addictive. And it's like, and then I'll also mention just watching them do things in areas of our business that I never could have done. And it's like, if I was doing that full time, what you were doing, I wouldn't have done it as well as you are. And I try to let them know that. I think that creates, relationship, engagement, trust, where, you have each other's backs and you've worked really hard to build this together. And when you build something from the ground up, there's nothing like it in the world, right? There's no way that what we do could exist anywhere else. There's other engineering companies out there. There's other service providers that work in the same space as we do. But I don't think there's any possibility that they do it how we do it, because we've made a lot of mistakes and we've had a lot of wins, I would say. But most of it was bred out of our ideas. And so there's no way it could exist elsewhere. And even if it did exactly the same, the people are different. So, I'd like to think of it like, where we don't think about it as competition. We think about, how do we get better each and every day? And I think, if everybody, or at least a majority of people, show up with that mentality, it creates a pretty positive working environment. And to me, the most notable thing is that I think if people were to listen to this from the company, there's many of them that would probably think, I'll bet you Ryan's talking about me right now. Because there's more than one example, truthfully. There's a lot of people.
Which is when business becomes so fun.
It's fun. It's so much fun.
When you're first starting, all that grit and that hard effort you put into it, it's still difficult. But just like you're saying, the full circle of when you all of a sudden have somebody on your team for 12 years who is getting ready to run your entire company, and along the way got married and has a family and is winning in life, it just shifts your focus like, all right, this is worth it. I think for me is even more so than pride. It's like this deep sense of satisfaction that, yes, the effort is paying off. Yes, we are truly making an impact. And clearly the market needs somebody like us. And I know, working with Lake Superior Consulting, we have a couple mutual clients. And one of them we have an annual meeting with at least once a year. We find ourselves in their office quite often. But he always comments how awesome LSC is to work with and the good work you guys do. And he especially appreciates when we get to work together because he knows it's a couple Midwestern companies taking good care of business. And that's not a knock on anyone else. It's just something that you guys should be prideful of, that you have done great work.
Feels amazing to hear you say that.
And because
we hear similar as well.
And Ryan,
about you.
Yeah, there's something you mentioned, the satisfaction that comes from a customer giving you a positive review then you said, or giving you more work. Like, that's a true testament to what you're doing. All of that is true. I think there's also this thing that if a client is willing to tell somebody else how good you are, that really speaks volumes about your business. And everyone at LSC ought to be proud of that, because I know just within our little business that it takes every single person to be a positive impact. Sure, there's one person who has more client interaction than the other. But if we have a safety incident on the job, that's a reflection on the entire company, not on the person doing the face visits, right? So I just think it's really incredible to watch. And then obviously, our office, one of our offices is here in Duluth. You have an office here. And just over the years, I've seen LSC grow. And I've always been interested in that whole story, that what goes into that, because LSC versus another engineering provider, same exact base. Like, you both have the same things at your disposal, but one takes off and prospers and the other one becomes one of the stats that fails, right? As an entrepreneur. It always boils down to somebody with some drive and some enthusiasm to take something and own it, and like with real passion, push it forward. And obviously that's what you had when you started, and then it naturally developed into leadership. What was is the old owner out of the picture, the founder?
Yeah, so it would be wrong to say it was just me, right? I'd like to think that I gained a lot, I fed off a lot of the energy of others too.
Sure.
But there's a lot of great people, and there still are, that are delivering on that. And the reality is, it's amazing to hear you say that, by the way, the compliments. I don't deserve them. I think the team members who are working for that customer deserve them. We've certainly gone through phases in our life cycle and hard times like any business. And I think it's just a matter of what you learn from that, how you react. Our founder and president retired in January of 2019. So about 6 years ago, I guess it'd be 6.5 years ago now, when I had stepped into the role as the organizational leader, which felt like some pretty big shoes to fill. So we still have a very positive, I think, relationship. And certainly in the early days, I was calling on him for guidance. But I think also, we also, I think, had the opportunity, myself and many others, to make the business our own as well.
Yeah, I read that you guys had been privately owned, and then you became privately owned by a different company, like a private equity is what I assumed was a transaction, then got sold to another private equity, and then in the last 5 years, you guys bought it back.
Yeah, so we started as a small private business. Our founder was the owner, and then he brought in employee owners, allowed them to buy into the business. Was sort of the model he went with in certain cases, and so we had many employee owners, and we got to a point in about 2011 where we couldn't meet the demand of the market. I remember calling him and saying, I just sold some projects, won some projects. These things are things we've been going after for many years, and the day is finally here. And these are like recurring type contracts, and it's ours to lose over time, so to speak. And we can really build around this. I need to hire 3 people. And his response is, well, you can hire 1. It's like, well, wait, what? What? Why is that? This is long-term work. It's sustainable, project work. This isn't like I need 3 people for the next 30 days. And he's like, yeah, you can hire 1. And what I didn't realize at the time is that we had about 15 leaders that were all trying to hire 3 people, and I didn't recognize the drain or the difficulty or the strain that puts on cash flow. So as a business with about 110, I think we had about 110 employees, and tremendous opportunity, and we were winning work. We just couldn't hire the people fast enough. And I think a lot of people don't understand that when you hire somebody and you win a project, or let's say we have to hire in advance of doing the work oftentimes. And so what's involved in that? Well, there's a lot of safety requirements. There's a lot of training. You're talking 2 to 4 to 6 weeks to get somebody ready to deploy, especially if they're going into the field in the area I was. Best case scenario, you get them traveling within a month, at which point you're covering hotel room, fuel, vehicle, equipment, their salary, a lot of overtime, and even beyond, you have to get them a laptop, right?
Yeah.
Things like that. And then if you're lucky, you can get that invoice out to that customer within a few weeks. We were probably more like a month or 2. Yeah. And then you're probably anywhere from 30 to 60, 70 days before you actually take in the cash. And so if everybody that wanted to hire hired, it would have put us in a very difficult and probably unhealthy cash cycle as a business. And so he was managing the hires because of the cash flow. And so we were faced with a situation, and this is all my recollection, I wouldn't call it fact.
Yeah.
where we were forced to make decisions, not that ones that we felt were best for our business, but ones we could afford to make. And that's frustrating. And I think a lot of companies you read about might fail when they're the most successful, and it's for reasons like this. So thankfully he had the insight and the know-how to say, wait, we have to temper this a little bit. But ultimately we were able to partner with another organization. They are in our space, not in our exact space, so not engineering and testing, but in our market. And I would call it quasi-private equity. It wasn't really private equity at all. It would be more like an angel investor. But they came in and they got equity in the business, and they gave us cash to go grow our business. And in the course of 3 years, we grew from 110 employees to about 330.
Wow.
So that was a lot of fun. It was like every day, every Monday, you're meeting several new people.
Yeah.
And it's hard to keep up at some points. And so they also, though, probably equally as importantly, gave us the knowledge or support to establish things like HR and IT and safety and, in some cases, marketing. You think about what are the things that are required to actually run the business and allow a business to grow to that magnitude. And those were certainly things we can't afford to hire people to do work, much less afford to invest in that in ourselves. And so they had a leader that came into our business and partnered really well with us, and I think gave guidance and instilled confidence that we could go make some investments in ourselves. And so 2015, we were about 300 and some employees, at which point I like to think of that as like a textbook, 2 entities coming together with a common goal and then a good exit strategy. And so I don't think long-term, and I can only guess at this, I don't know intent or the why, but it felt to me like, at least, in retrospect, that they probably felt like they had taken us as far as they could. I don't think they really knew a ton about engineering itself, but certainly a lot about business. And I think they probably also, my guess is saw some things happening on the market in the near future. But I don't know that. It's the market did have some downturn, really in the 2016 timeframe. So at that point, we were sold to a publicly traded entity. So we went from small private to larger private to having an investor that's, again, quasi private equity to publicly traded. And so that publicly traded journey, I look back on it fondly because I had a lot of learning, I think, throughout that journey, understanding, what the expectations are, how business can work, what the difficult parts of it might look like. But ultimately, we were able to execute a management buyout that occurred September 1st of 2022. So we're coming up here on our 3-year anniversary of private ownership. And since buying the business back, it was myself and a business partner, Dave Hokinson, who's been at the business longer than I have. He started in 2005. We were able to buy the business back together. And then since then, we've expanded to many more employee owners, other perspectives from our various owners and the group in general on the best approach towards bringing more talent along in that ownership journey. And I've noticed that recently you went down the ESOP program. I looked at that. We didn't go that direction for a lot of reasons, but I think similar end goal.